My name is Diane Mercer. And 3 days ago, my husband was rushed into intensive care after what doctors called a massive cardiac event. I built Mercer Gridworks, a $52 million data infrastructure company that keeps half this city online. But nothing prepared me for the silence of that hospital corridor. The scent of antiseptic and fear clung to the air as I hurried toward his room. Clutching the visitor badge like it was proof of control I no longer had. A nurse intercepted me before I could reach the door. Her tag read Keisha Nolan, and her voice trembled just enough to make me stop. "Mrs. Mercer," she whispered. "You need to hide now. Please. Just trust me." Before I could ask why, she opened a maintenance door and guided me into a narrow observation room beside the ICU bay. The lights dimmed automatically, leaving only a sliver of glass between me and the truth. Through that slit, I saw Porter Vance, my supposedly unconscious husband, sitting upright in bed, whispering to a woman in a designer coat I didn't recognize. Her name slipped out in his voice, Talia. My stomach tightened as he said, almost casually, "The medical proxies signed. Tonight we unlock her accounts. The ransomware is already inside her system." Keisha's hand found my arm, steady and cold. Then came Porter's final words. Quiet, but razor sharp. "By Friday, she'll have her tragic accident in the bath." And in that instant, I knew my life and my empire had just been targeted for execution. Shock lasted less than a minute. Years of running data centers had trained me to move when everything else froze. In my world, panic was downtime, and downtime cost millions. By the time I stepped out of that hospital, my mind was already building a recovery plan, not for Porter's health, but for my survival. At my home office, I powered up my secure console and launched what I once called Protocol Mercury, a system-wide lockdown designed for cyber attacks but now repurposed for betrayal. I froze every joint account, rerouted all company operations through shadow wallets Porter didn't know existed, and suspended corporate authorizations under emergency code. The numbers vanished from his reach in seconds, and I felt a pulse of control return to my veins. My next call was to Alma Drake, my attorney, the only person I trusted with both blood and ink. I told her everything in clipped sentences: the forged proxy, the affair, the ransomware. She didn't waste a breath. "We file for divorce today," she said, "and request an immediate injunction against asset transfers." I agreed without hesitation. Knowing speed was my only ally. Finally, I called my internal security lead. Within minutes, my IT team mirrored the entire Gridworks repository into an isolated sandbox. That's where they found the signature Porter's code buried deep. A hidden backdoor leading to a crypto wallet holding $650,000. Proof he'd been draining me long before the hospital. As I stared at the data trail glowing across my monitor, my phone buzzed. A message from Keisha. "Doctor Siddiq just signed Porter's cardiac report false. All of it. He's planning long-term care." My heart hardened. This wasn't a medical crisis anymore. It was war. The next morning, the hospital became my battlefield. And Keisha Nolan was my inside line. She knew every clause of hospital policy, every loophole hidden in its sterile language. When I asked her to buy me time, she didn't hesitate. Within the hour, she triggered a mandatory equipment recalibration under national compliance standards, forcing a new cardiac review that would stall any paperwork for at least a few hours. I watched from the hallway as Dr. Omar Siddiq frowned at the sudden order. He couldn't argue it was procedure. Keisha moved with quiet authority, swapping test identifiers and rerouting electronic reports so that nothing could be finalized without a secondary review. To anyone else, it looked like bureaucracy. To me, it was the sound of gears grinding to a halt. A machine built to delay the inevitable. Across the ICU glass, I caught sight of Talia Quinn, pacing in her red heels, clearly frustrated. Her phone was glued to her ear as she whispered into it, the mask of confidence cracking at the edges. Keisha texted me minutes later she'd overheard Talia mention a media plan, a campaign designed to paint me as unstable, exhausted, and medicated, all to frame my death as inevitable. At 1:40 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A message from Alma Drake flashed on the screen. Filing complete. Court stamp at 2:00 sharp. I exhaled slowly. Eyes on the clock. 20 minutes to cut their plan off at the knees. The courthouse clock struck 2 as the process server entered the ICU, escorted by hospital security. I watched from the end of the hall, pretending to check my phone, while every nerve in my body hummed with tension. Porter Vance, the man I had once trusted with my future, sat propped against his pillows, feigning frailty for an audience that was no longer convinced. The moment the server said his name, he jerked upright, all pretense of illness evaporating under the harsh fluorescent light. Every movement was caught on the room's security camera, Porter shouting, grabbing the envelope, tearing it open with shaking hands. His face twisted as he read the first page. The bold header declaring petition for divorce and immediate injunction against asset transfer. The nurses nearby froze, stunned by the transformation. This wasn't a patient fighting for his life. It was a man watching his con unravel in real time. Across the room, Talia Quinn dropped her designer tote, scattering papers across the sterile floor. I recognized my company letterhead, instantly forged ownership transfers, a fake medical proxy. Even a draft was stamped with my counterfeit signature. The server backed away as Porter's rage exploded, his voice loud enough to echo down the corridor. Moments later, Keisha Nolan texted me a single photo, Porter's insurance forms, freshly signed, naming him as the sole beneficiary of an $8 million life policy. I stared at the image until my vision sharpened into clarity. His mask was gone, his plan exposed. And this time, the evidence was all on camera. That night, I turned my grief into a task list. Mercer Gridworks had survived server breaches, blackouts, and cyber attacks. This was no different, only more personal. I gathered my top security engineers on an encrypted call and told them to treat the situation like an internal compromise. Within the hour, we isolated the malware Porter had planted and began reverse engineering his code. Layer by layer, his digital footprint was arrogant. Like everything about him, hidden inside the ransomware was a command key linking directly to a crypto wallet worth $650,000, proof that Porter had been siphoning funds for months. I ordered the team to embed a counter trigger into the code, one that would activate the moment he logged in from his personal device. It wouldn't harm him physically, but it would mirror every action he took and record it in real time. Evidence wrapped in his own fingerprints. While my team worked, I called Serena Blake, a financial crimes investigator I'd met at a security summit years ago. When she heard the words forged proxy and medical fraud, her tone hardened instantly. We coordinated a timeline of evidence, fake documents, financial transfers, digital keys, and prepared a warrant request for the crypto accounts. For the first time in days, I felt my heart beat steady. Before midnight, the trap was set. I sent Porter a link labeled Cleanup Protocol, pretending to surrender my systems to his control. He'd think he'd won. In truth, the moment he touched it, His network would expose its entire structure to law enforcement. The hunter had just become the data trail. By the next morning, Serena Blake called with a voice that sounded more like disbelief than victory. Her team had accessed the mirrored files Porter unknowingly triggered when he opened my cleanup link. Inside, they found a folder labeled Prospect Ledger, filled with names, photos, and notes written in Porter's crisp, methodical style. 4 women across 4 different states, each wealthy, each recently widowed, each dead from what appeared to be accidents. The deeper we read, the colder the air seemed to get. Porter had been running the same con for years, moving from city to city, charming women into trust before orchestrating their deaths and absorbing their assets. He'd refined his pattern like an algorithm, every move calculated, every story recycled. Tucked between the files was a separate exchange thread with a city planning commissioner, confirming payments for fast-tracked zoning approvals. It wasn't just murder, it was a network of corruption. I stared at the screen, numb, as Serena explained that this council of lobbyists and officials had protected Porter's movements, helping him cover financial trails in exchange for his influence. He was never just a manipulative husband. He was a small but deliberate piece of something larger and darker. The idea that my own company's reputation could have been used to sanitize their crimes made my stomach twist. That afternoon, I released a statement through Alma Drake, announcing a foundation for victims of financial coercion, funded by my own assets. It wasn't charity, it was positioning. Some would call it control of the narrative, others, revenge in a tailored suit. At dusk, my phone lit up with a blocked number. Talia Quinn's voice cracked through the static. He's planning to kill me too. Diane, I have the audio. Tell me what to do. By dawn, Alma Drake and Serena Blake had the plan ready, a controlled recording designed to catch Porter Vance in his own web. With Talia Quinn's cooperation, they secured a warrant and wired her apartment with discreet surveillance. The setup was simple. She'd tell Porter she'd moved a fraction of the stolen funds, $300,000, into a new crypto wallet, but needed his guidance for the final accident plan. Every word, every breath would be recorded under federal supervision. That afternoon, Porter arrived, his composure back in place. Tailored jacket covering the panic that had begun to surface. Talia played her role flawlessly, trembling just enough to look believable. He leaned forward, explaining in clinical detail how to stage a drowning that would pass any forensic test, boasting about how Denver would be just like Dallas. His arrogance made the room feel smaller, the air heavier. From the surveillance van outside, I listened through the live feed, the sound of his voice steady, practiced, almost bored, was more chilling than anger could ever be. He mentioned 2 previous victims by name, confirming the details from the Prospect Ledger. When Talia hesitated, he reminded her that I wouldn't be a problem much longer. That was the last line we needed. As Porter logged into his encrypted wallet to confirm the transfer, the mirrored system captured everything accounts. Contacts. Timestamps. The signal light turned green, and Serena gave the nod. Within seconds, federal agents flooded the hallway. Porter barely looked up before the cuffs clicked shut. This time, the performance ended with him off stage, and every audience member was law enforcement. 3 weeks later, Porter Vance stood in federal court wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his tailored suits. The evidence was overwhelming recordings, forged documents, crypto trails, and the Prospect Ledger connecting him to multiple deaths. Serena Blake testified first, her calm precision laying out the digital architecture of his crimes. By the time the prosecution finished, even the defense attorney looked hollow. Porter was convicted on all counts: attempted murder, insurance fraud, money laundering, and cyber intrusion. His sentence, life imprisonment without parole, landed like a closing door. Talia Quinn's fate was lighter but far from merciful. She accepted a plea deal for cooperating, admitting to forgery, identity theft, and obstruction. The court acknowledged her help in capturing Porter, but it didn't erase her crimes. She received 5 years in prison, followed by a 10-year ban from any public relations or financial consulting work. Watching her led away, I felt neither pity nor triumph, only the quiet balance of justice measured in consequences. Dr. Omar Sadiq faced his own reckoning before the state medical board. His license was revoked after he confessed to falsifying Porter's cardiac report in exchange for payment. He would serve 2 years under supervised release, performing community medical work at public clinics. Professional disgrace was the mildest punishment the system could offer him. On the civil front, Alma Drake secured restitution for every cent Porter had stolen. The courts ordered the return of $650,000 in crypto funds, plus damages for breach of fiduciary trust. With the injunctions complete, Mercer Gridworks stood clear of liability and free from the shadow of his schemes. At the next board meeting, I named Keisha Nolan Chief Operations Officer for Logistics and announced a full scholarship fund for her son. Some called it generosity, I called it closure. Every piece of this story had cost something, and everyone involved had now paid their price. 2 months after the sentencing, I received a call from Serena Blake. Porter Vance had requested a final meeting, claiming he wanted to make things right. I hesitated for a long time before agreeing, not out of curiosity, but because closure sometimes requires facing what tried to destroy you. The prison's visiting room was stark and cold, a fitting mirror for what was left of him. Porter looked smaller than I remembered. His arrogance dissolved into something that almost resembled fear. He admitted that there were 3 other victims whose deaths he had planned but never executed, and handed Serena a written statement with names, dates, and financial records. His voice wavered only once when he said he had loved me in his own way. I didn't answer. Some words don't deserve acknowledgement. I left the paper on the table and walked away, hearing the door seal shut behind me like the end of a storm. A week later, Porter died of a stroke in his cell. The news reached me through Serena's brief message, simple and factual. I didn't feel relief, only stillness. For the first time in years, my life wasn't being measured in threats or deadlines. Talia Quinn began her prison term. Dr. Omar Sadiq started community service, and the last traces of the Shadow Council were dismantled. At Mercer Gridworks, growth replaced chaos. Keisha Nolan ran logistics with quiet confidence, and her son started the scholarship program I'd founded in their name. Some evenings, I sat in my office watching the city lights flicker through the glass. A reminder that order can rise from ruin. Porter had bet everything on my death. I had bet everything on my life, and I won. That, in the end, was the only confession that mattered. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord or reminded you of your own battles, share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Until next time, take care of your peace.